Okay. Okay, well, good morning. Welcome to the Cyberseer Roundtable. What's my path to XDR? Thank you for joining us today. A couple of housekeeping rules. Questions, we've got a chat box here, so if you want to use the chat box, please do. We'll be rounding up the questions and addressing them at the end. If you want to get on the end and ask questions personally, that's also going to be fine during the session. But if you could all please mute yourselves, we would very much appreciate that. Shall we move to the agenda? So we'll be keeping you for about an hour today, and we'll be addressing the question of what XDR is, looking at where you're at in that path, and actually what really the problem is, and does it actually help your business? We then have, I'm glad to say, one of our customers from Missouri Bank, Richard Perry, joining us to discuss how it's affected his business and the challenges that she's faced and got over with this. And then we'll move to an interactive Q&A session. So with us today is myself, Gareth Lauder. I'm a co-founder and director at Cyberseer. I'm more on the commercial side of things. But if I could pass over to Adrian.
Hello, I'm the other director and other co-founder at Cyberseer, and I'm responsible for the technical and software development side of the business.
And we're delighted to have Sam with us today from Exabeam.
Hi everyone, good morning. My name's Sam Humphries and I look after security strategy for EMEA at Exabeam.
Thanks, Sam. And I'm not know if Richard's on mute at the moment, but he's with us. Richard, good morning.
Yeah, morning Gareth, morning everyone. So I'm Richard Perry, I'm head of IT with responsibilities for EMEA for Missouri Bank.
Lovely. Thank you, Richard, and we really appreciate you being here today. I think actually probably just before we hit the XDR, just a quick word about who Cyberseer are, for those of you that don't know us. I mean, in reality, we work with and we really address advanced threat detection, and we use advanced technologies to do that. We work with our customers who are generally enterprise customers of a particular size. We're not really into SME. I think I would probably articulate ourselves as really the glue between the technology and your reality, and really making this stuff work. So I think without going into it too much at this stage, I think I'll hand over to Sam now, and we can have a discussion around XDR.
Thank you, Gareth. Okay, morning again. So XDR. Extended detection and response. So sounds interesting. We're going to talk about what it is. Adrian and I were discussing this in the build-up, and I know, Adrian, you had some thoughts on XDR.
Well, yeah, I mean, sounds like this stuff's been around for a while, and I hopefully we'll get through this, and at the end of this, folks won't just think that this is a marketing exercise by vendors, because I think you guys have done a really good job, and it'd be interesting when Richard talks around what we've done with him and how we've kind of been doing XDR with him, but it wasn't called XDR at the time. So I'm very interested to understand how this is not just a marketing exercise by the vendors. And I think you know that question was coming anyway, so it's not like I'm just throwing it over the wall there.
No, and it's a great question, I think. So is it a marketing exercise? I think if you look to the market right now, there are a lot of vendors saying they do XDR, a lot of vendors. So when we go through this section here, we'll talk about the different types, Gartner's opinion on it, because they obviously have an opinion, and then what we think about it as well. I would happily say it's more than just a marketing exercise. It's put a wrapper certainly around what we do. And when we first looked at this, we definitely, this XDR term had popped up. And I would say, absolutely, we aligned what we have and we said, yeah, actually, this is what we're doing. It's just now got a terminology rather than being a name for a bunch of point products. All right, so should we talk about the problem? So this has been a challenge for years. These are not new problems for the most part. Security tools are, I'm sure you have many of them in your network. Most of us have a plethora of them. Some organizations have 75 or more. So they don't always talk to each other. They make a lot of noise. If you have the blessing of a legacy SIM and you've lived through that, and I know, you know, Adrian, you've been working with SIMs for a long time, that they're complicated. They take a long time to implement, and they can be a good place for centralizing logs, but they can also then create a whole bunch of work as well. Lots of tools, and there are many different standards, methodologies. They vary very much. Some of them are old world, some of them are new world. Things change, things don't get updated. So there are a lot of problems across threat detection, investigation and response that XDR goes a long way to solve. So this story might seem a little familiar. Certainly in the earlier days of SIM, and still now to some extent, people get their logs and they dump them in the SIM. Detection is based a lot around manual alert prioritization, around rules, and not always with enough context to be able to actually do anything when you get an alert. Investigating, again, can be very manual, lots of pivoting, looking at the raw logs, jumping between consoles, trying to pin stuff together piece by piece. That can take a very long time. And if you're trying to figure out what happened once you've got an alert, that can take literally hours or in some cases days.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. For me, the most difficult thing, and I've done all of these pieces individually, is the timeline piece, normalizing data from multiple different sources to build an event flow, and then trying to figure out the context and relationships between those multiple events. And that's before you even try and consider anything like behavior, whether this has been seen before. For me, that's always been the most difficult thing. And I think what Exabeams were really, you got that right before you did XDR, because you had your ability to automatically generate a contextual visual timeline. That's the game changer for me in all of this. So I'm still interested to see what XDR is going to bring to the table and make things even better for us.
So I think it's a really great point. I love the fact that we do this, bringing that information together. My background is incident response and operations, and knowing how long it takes to answer questions, it is painful. We actually went through, if you've never seen one of our timelines before, and then just jumping to the end, that is an option for you to go and have a look and get a demo. But we stitch those things together automatically. We have one of our guys go through, who's previously a very senior SOC engineer. He pieced together just one of the basic timelines using manual queries, and it would have taken over 20 hours of queries, waiting for them to run, pinning together the information for something that we produce automatically. So this is a real problem. And if you are on the average side on your security operations team, which is around about 8 to 10 people, if they're taking 20 hours per investigation, that's not a lot that you can get done in a day. And then we get to response. So once you found out what on earth's happened, being able then to respond to that, it's very easy to, especially if you haven't got the right information, either have an inconsistent response or the wrong response and end up kind of back where you started, or not fully clean up what's happened. We've done an investigation again with 2 SOC analysts. You give them the same piece of information, they run through and do manual investigation. 2 completely different answers come out at the end, and those answers absolutely drive what your response is. So incomplete remediation, missed remediation, or indeed the wrong remediation can cause you other troubles as well. So if you recognize any of these issues, XDR can go a long way to help you. All right, let's defer to Gartner for a second, because right now we have endpoint vendors saying they do XDR, network vendors saying they do XDR, service vendors saying they do XDR. So what did Gartner think about it? So this is their description. I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'm sure you've been reading it whilst I've been talking. But ultimately, it's about correlating that data and helping organizations, get the answers they need faster. They've actually got a great report, which we can send you, which is the Gartner Innovation Insight for Extended Detection and Response. So they see the problem as being this: too many tools, too many vendors, not enough integration, and not enough incident response built in. The way they think about XDR helping is really being able to correlate information, provide context, and build in that automation so that you can have humans on the right things. Complexity is a huge challenge. So our friends at Gartner agree with that. They believe that we need to reduce that complexity so that you get better outcomes. And I think this is the crux of some of the confusion right now. There are different flavors of XDR. Even Gartner say the market is immature right now. This is a fairly new term in the general scheme of things. If it makes you feel any better or worse, I'm already hearing a new one around ADR, which is automated detection and response. Yeah, I see Adrian wincing. But ultimately, the XDR market is new, and the capabilities are very different depending on who you talk to.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Gartner put this out, and I think this can send the wrong message. And some of these things are tricky, but I think I disagree with some, particularly the final statement. I think XDR functionality in some form or other has been around for years, and I mean even before Exabeam brought out its XDR specific stuff, you still consumed and correlated data from all sorts of different log sources, and you generated that contextual timeline that we already talked about. And you've had your automated IR module for, I think we were talking about it, well over a couple of years now. So I think this can be misleading, and people might think, oh, this stuff's really difficult to get to. I think people are closer than they actually think, and hopefully that should come out through this as well. Yeah, I think I agree with some of it, but I think that it can scare people off, and I don't think that's a great thing to do.
I think that's very, very true. As we go through this, we'll talk about some of the different types. And you're right. When we first started talking about this at Exabeam, we were like, well, wait a minute, we do this, we do this, we do this. We do these things already for the most part, but how is that different? So putting it together as we go through and talk about it as an end-to-end process with content that works across the board driven by use cases, that's where it starts to come together. So let's dive in and look at that. First of all, just a bit of myth busting or explaining the differences between two things. So right now, there are kind of two main flavors of XDR. There's native XDR and Open XDR. So native XDR is very much closed. So basically, you're getting all those capabilities from the same vendor. They do the endpoint, they do the back-end solution. It's all tied into one thing. There are pluses to that in that they have control of those products, they have control of the content. However, bringing in new stuff to that ecosystem is very difficult, if not impossible. It also requires potentially a lot of reinvestment. And if you've ever lived through the joy of an endpoint refresh, that's fun that I wouldn't recommend, possibly after a DLP project. Open XDR gives you a slightly different way of looking at the world. The clue is in the open part. So the Open XDR vendors focus on the back end, providing that analytics, providing the machine learning capabilities, providing the automation, but much more integration. So much easier to drop into your existing ecosystem. No endpoint refresh, which is very important, and the ability to automate with what you've got. Now, that's not to say if you've just got antivirus and a firewall that you can just drop in some XDR capabilities and Bob's your father's brother, everything's going to work. So it is a bit more complex than that, but it does mean that it's easier to shift from having some point products and capabilities, potentially having a SIM in there as well, as it can be a good thing, or a log management. You can drop these capabilities over the top, and then you've got an XDR scenario going on in your organization. All right. Okay, so while I'm being the doom monger, security implementations don't always go so well. Sometimes you can get new tools if the processes aren't aligned to the way that those tools work, or you're still expecting a new tool to do something the old tool did, and you're not embracing those new capabilities. You're not necessarily going to get the outcomes that you're looking for. Many security implementations require a lot of customization. A SIM, I'm looking at you for the most part, especially some of those legacy SIMs, where there's a lot of implementation, but actually then still you are tuning and tweaking as you go. So something that, a beautiful dream maybe never comes to fruition, and that it's very time consuming, and people are being glorified database admins when really they should be getting on and doing security work. And it is rare for security teams to have one project going on at once. So if you've got multiple priorities happening, multiple things trying to fit in all at the same time, it can be you get scope creep, things change, and you don't necessarily get the success that you were hoping for when you first invested. So why does that matter? Okay, so we want to solve those problems. We want to solve both the productivity challenges. We want to solve the issue of having a new solution come in and making it something that you can get up and running with very quickly. Excuse me. And be able to actually get your analysts working on the right things, or having your service provider having their folks working on the right things. So this is Exabeam Fusion XDR. We called it Fusion because it's bringing together a various set of tools, both on our side and for our customers. It's delivered by cloud. And the first thing you'll see there is the turnkey threat detection, investigation and response, which sounds a little marketing-esque, I agree. But not a lot of tweaking required, not this horrible year-long rollout of trying to get a SIM in place. A lot of this stuff will work pretty much on day one out of the box. Some of it takes a couple of weeks to normalize. You can get things up and running from a use case perspective pretty quickly. It depends what you want to do with it. There are various ways of looking at that, which I will cover in a bit. Threat detection improves, very much outcome driven, and looking across the board from collection through to investigation and to response on a use case basis, based on the different types of threats, which we package up into different categories. And ultimately, you want to be faster and better and more accurate in your response. So I mentioned earlier about the, give two analysts the same question, you get two different answers at the end. You want these repeatable outcomes that are fast and accurate. So ultimately, people can make the right choices at the right times. This is what it looks like. This is a super high level architecture, but regardless of what you've got, to some extent, if you've got XDR in place from an endpoint perspective, we can work with that. If you have a SIM in place, we can work with that. If you've got your data in the cloud, we can talk to a whole plethora of cloud applications. You can see some of the vendors here. This is not the full list by any means. Getting data from business applications is very simple. We can plug those in with cloud connectors, so you don't have to play around with joyous APIs which change. And then 200 plus tech alliance partners. So very tight integrations means that you can get that workflow running across the board from collection through to investigation through to response.
That's this is actually quite important, I think. So what you're saying, if I've got it right, is that you can dip into these existing and in some cases quite costly data repositories and just put out the stuff you need to meet the use cases that you've defined. Is that what you're saying there?
Correct.
Brilliant. Okay, well, that's really quite useful. So if I've got a consolidated, I'm ex-investment banking, we had large consolidated log servers where we dumped everything in there. We knew full well we didn't want to send all that stuff to the SIEM because it would floor the SIEM, but we had a situation where the ops teams would be in there, the network teams would be in there pulling out the data they want, and then we just shipped out what we thought was good security data to the SIEM. You're saying you can essentially do the same thing and allow the other parts of the organization to still access those kind of consolidated log servers for the bits and pieces that they need to run their side of the business.
Exactly right. Logs are very valuable and they have different use cases for different people, right? So IT, I mean, Splunk is a great tool for IT, really good tool for IT. We're not saying get rid of it. Absolutely have those use cases. Pick your log repository of choice. There are many now. Have those logs, working for other teams. But then now with XDR, you get your lens ultimately over that data to give you the things that you need specifically for security operations, and you're not then tripping over folks with their network requirements, their IT requirements, and then we just pull the data that's needed to be able to solve those use cases. All right, use cases, let's talk about them. So we've got three kind of high-level categories here. The first one is external threats. I think that's fairly self-explanatory. They're on the outside. So it could be, we'll go into the details in a minute, but this is your malware, phishing, ransomware. There's a list that we've got coming up. That's where a lot of people tend to start. Hopefully you've already got some things in place to tackle these. Otherwise we wouldn't be talking. But there is, having that end-to-end workflow across the entire use case is really, really important. A lot of folks tend to kind of stop or miss bits along the way. So we want to make sure that you're doing end-to-end. Next piece is compromised insiders. So the unwitting insider as opposed to the malicious, who's our next category. So we've got either credentials who've been exploited by somebody else, either they've come up on a data dump somewhere, they've been hit by a phish, someone's stolen their credentials, the compromised insider, or indeed then the insider threat from a malicious perspective, which is unfortunately very much on the rise. It's been a tough 15+ months for everybody. We've seen a lot of changes on the insider threat side, and intent has changed, and detecting some of this stuff across the board has got more complicated due to distributed working for the most part, but also there's people have been furloughed, there are people who have lost their jobs. This has been a real problem, in addition to the huge rise in ransomware attacks, which is just despicable in some cases, and it took the phishing guys literally minutes to flip their script over so that it worked with COVID style hooks to try and get people to click their links. So these are our kind of 3 high-level use case categories. And then if we dig in, this is what they look like. So again, I'm not going to read all this to you. I'll give you a second to digest. But you can see on the external threat side, really kind of the big ticket items that make a lot of noise for the most part. Ransomware is a strange one. We talked about this, didn't we, Adrian, in the run-up as to where does this fit?
Yeah, it's kind of a symptom, right? It's not a cause. If you need to fix the other things really to deal with ransomware. If you get hit with ransomware, being told you've been hit with ransomware is way too late. And I think we kind of agree. I think this is an endpoint issue. You should have a decent endpoint solution to deal with ransomware. But if you actually deal with the core of how it's going to be delivered in the first place, via phishing or malware, then you're well on the way to protecting yourself against that. But if you do get hit with ransomware, you need an automated response that's going to shut down either kill packets or shut down processes immediately. That's really the only way to deal with ransomware. You don't need to be told you've got ransomware. You will know very quickly.
It's one of those things. I mean, I remember back to the fake AV days, which was kind of the dad or grandfather, or indeed grandmother or mother of ransomware, when that would pop up and the leery stuff on the screen. We're seeing now a big shift in ransomware too. It's not just what you're seeing on the screen and they're saying, right, well, we've locked your files and give us the monies, or you're not having them back. It's now moved very much more into extortionware, and ransomware as a distraction too. So this could be its own other webcast. I don't want to go too far down the ransomware rabbit hole, but yes, it's an external threat, but there are many reasons why you can end up with ransomware. Patching is another one. I think that needs to be, and it's easy for me to sit here and say, well, patching's hard. Patching's really, really hard. I get that, especially if you are in an organic network, for sure. So you probably had a chance to read through these whilst we've been yabbering. So these are the 3 buckets. So what does that look like? We've aligned it here to MITRE ATT&CK. The colors on the previous screen were relative to what's going on here. So each category has kind of got its areas. We have a coverage for over 100 MITRE ATT&CK techniques. We've also, if you love compliance, who doesn't love compliance? There's coverage there as well. And getting these things set up, we can support you, and Cyberseer have an excellent service, particularly around MITRE. Do you want to just talk a little bit about that, Adrian?
Yeah, I was just going to say, this is actually really useful because I think it provides an easily understood and what's becoming a standardized way of describing what visibility you have across the various tactics. So it's very easy to explain to someone, say, if you go, oh yeah, we're doing some MITRE stuff. We actually, look, we've got coverage on the initial access all the way through, and you might say, okay, what about lateral movement? What can we do about that? So you can then start looking at techniques under there and particular use cases that you might be interested in for that as well. One of the things that we do it for, we model an environment in terms of the data sources or any proposed additional security changes that one of our customers might want to make. We also talk to our prospects about this, and we map it against the MITRE technique. So we say, okay, you've got these data sources, and if we map those through to the techniques, you can actually see what coverage you will get across this very visual way of understanding the threat landscape. And I think that's really helpful. Very quickly you see what you're going to get in terms of visibility. Also, more importantly, it shows you where your gaps are. And if you're really interested in I don't know, privilege escalation, and you've got no coverage there. Well, we can say, well, look, if these are the techniques like new processes starting or spawning, you should be looking at these endpoint type solutions that will give you that kind of telemetry to do that. And that's a very quick and easy way of giving somebody a very brief overview of their landscape and the visibility that they will have based on the technologies and data sources they've got deployed. And we do that as part of new prospects, when we talk new prospects, part of proof of concept. And also, as I said, with our existing customers, when they say, look, we're thinking about getting some new technology, can you tell us what coverage that will give us? Or they say, we've had a look at the map you've done for us, and we seem to be a bit light over here. What technologies do you think we should go and invest in? And it's a very useful tool for that sort of thing, and very easy to understand, I think.
Awesome. All right, let's have a look at one of these in a little bit more detail, and I'm just keeping an eye on the clock because I know we want to get to Richard as well. So, data exfiltration. Starting from the left-hand side, these are the data sources that you need. Adrian just very kindly mentioned that. The data sources obviously matter. You need to make sure you've got the right technologies, the right log sources coming in, and the right capability switched on as well. This is all delivered by us then as a content pack. So you see from detection rule types onwards, you get the different types of rules that trigger within the product. These aren't rules from a correlation point of view necessarily. There are machine learning models also that go on in the background that look for these types of activities. The aligned MITRE techniques there. The investigation tools that you get as part of that content pack. So you get safe searches that will appear in Threat Hunter. Smart timelines are able to pick up on this. And also guided investigation checklists for the analysts come as part and package of this use case. And then the automated actions as well.
Okay. So this is so whereas I asked, this is a marketing exercise at the beginning. So the way that we've always deployed Exabeam is by using use cases and identifying data sources to get those use cases. What you've actually done is you've then, where we would then manually build out the rule sets and the MITRE mapping, we'd actually do a manual MITRE reporting exercise as well. You have now put this all in one package and said, okay, these use cases, you have these data sources, then we'll provide you with the rest of the stuff automatically out of the box. So I think that's the big difference. You've now got a front to back package that does it all automatically, and you're making use of your incident response module as well there, which is I guess a key thing for the automated piece in terms of response, and automatic playbooks, which you kind of touched on, I think, but those are really quite useful to make sure, and everybody that's done an investigation knows a high pressure situation, right? You then have a playbook to follow, and everybody follows it, and you can update it as you go. So I think, right, so that's why it's not a marketing exercise, right? You've now put all of these things in place for anybody. Yeah.
Yes, exactly right. Exactly right. Okay. So benefits, just real quick. Guidance. It's so important. Like when your hair's on fire, it's having that step-by-step workflow really matters. Context, data sources, detection rules and models, all are mapped together. Detection capabilities. You've got the right questions and response actions in there to make sure that the analysts are doing the right things. Consistency. You're faster and you're better utilizing the resources that you have, because no one's sat there thinking, wow, I've got these analysts sat around thinking like, what should I do today? We're all busy. I'll jump over that one. That's very much a marketing slide. Right, let's talk about this. How do we get there? So first thing you want to look at is, what do you have today? This is again where Cyberseer can be great help to you. Looking at what you've got, aligning that with the MITRE capabilities, understanding your metrics. So first of all, what do you have? Secondly, what is it you want to look at? So you can define your desired use cases. They don't have to be in the order that we say, and we've got them kind of listed out. There may be some that are more important to you than others. There may be some that you can't do yet because you don't have the right data sources. So that's the mapping exercise there. If you decide, well, hey, I actually really do care about this particular use case, I want to get this new data source, new product in first to help me with that, you may decide to do that. You can have that potentially running in parallel with getting some different data use cases up and running. Deployment timelines and scope. And then making sure that it's operationalized. This is a bit that gets missed very commonly when a new solution goes in. So beyond, can you functionally make the platform work, but do your processes align? Have your metrics need an update? And are your people able to get the best out of it? Not just can they make it go? Are they really effective with the tooling? And then rinse and repeat. Ultimately, we can do these in various order. It really depends what your risk profile is and what you care about most and what you have in your stack currently to be able to achieve those use cases. So that's the part. You will get this part of the deck, by the way. So don't worry if you haven't made notes. Okay, last piece. I'm sure you're thinking this is amazing, but I've got a lot of priorities. Should I put this first? Maybe I should do a different project. What's the thing here? There's a whole bunch of questions here. If you can answer yes to any of these, and possibly it's more than one, I'll call out a couple of my favorites. I wouldn't say false positives are a favorite. I think it's still the bane of the industry after doing this for 21 years. Somehow we still accept it because, we'd rather not miss something, and therefore we accept false positives. False negatives still are the bigger concern. What don't we know? The people side of this, a lot of analysts are expected to train in their own time because there isn't time during the day. Hiring and retaining is still an issue. And then my favorite statistic of all, does anyone have equal to or more than 1,736 SOC analysts? Generally not. Some governments, maybe some big consulting firms. This is the number you would need to be able to handle 100,000 alerts a day if you handled each one of them manually. And most of us don't have that luxury of that many people. And to be honest, who would want to do that as a job? So beyond that, those challenges exist. XDR can help with them. These are the benefits to your business. And I'm really excited to hear from Richard in a minute to see kind of what difference this has made from his perspective. But certainly the operational efficiency and accuracy really does matter. Getting that consistency, that will absolutely lead to reduction in security and business risk. I think in the last, again, 15 or so months, seeing the difference of the security is now playing in the world of distributed working, trying to bring down that risk while supporting the business has been very, very tough. So XDR can absolutely help you there. Deriving more value from your existing investments, very important. And time is without doubt the most precious commodity in security operations. And then finally, this may sound a little hippie-esque, but I'm not sorry. Attrition rates and morale. If you are sat there all day doing the same job, literally going through a phishing emails queue and conveyor belting that stuff, it is boring work and you don't feel like you're using your skills to the best of your ability. I thoroughly believe that automation is an HR benefit. It will give people more interesting work to do. And I will leave you with a quote from one of our customers. He says that he uses this capability so that he can put human brains on human problems. That his folks aren't wasting time on some of this manual work that computers are completely capable of doing, and will do it faster and more accurately, so that the actual people can do the harder work, the more interesting work, and make the right choices at the right time with the machines to support them. We've got lots of customers. There you go. There's some quotes there from our customers about how this has helped them, particularly around use cases, which has been the game changer, and ensuring they've got that end-to-end detection, investigation, response capabilities. Adrian, did you have anything to add before we jump over to?
I was just going to say, I mean, going through that, and if you remember my comments about the Gartner slide, it is complicated stuff if you run in all directions at once. But because you've now put it, as I said, as a front-to-back package, it actually makes it, I wouldn't say it's easy, but it's not as difficult as people think to deploy. I think because you're dealing with this one thing that will talk to all sorts of different log sources and then has the rules and everything else built in, you're up and running quite quickly. And that, for me, is a key benefit, particularly when, if you measure it against anyone else that tries to put in any legacy scene, that can take, I think, some months, maybe years. It takes a long time. This stuff will get you up and running quite quickly, and you'll get value from it very quickly. I think that, for me, is the key thing, really, as a person that is hands-on and does this stuff.
I completely agree. we can, I mean, we've seen customers get value that day, literally that day. They've installed us in the morning, they're seeing stuff they've never seen before in the afternoon. So yes, when we say days, we don't mean a number of days. It's literally can be much faster, and that's I think that's a huge differentiator. Thank you so much. Gareth, back to you, my friend.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you very much for that, and Adrian. Could you click forward one, Sam?
I can.
Thank you very much. Hello, Richard. Are you off mute?
Yes, I am, Gareth. Hi.
Good morning and welcome. Thank you very much for joining us, Richard.